At Chindanduma, there was a small group of what we call destitutes. These were basically orphans who had served in the military during the war. They may have been very young, but there was a couple, Nomore and Lazarus, who were my particular companions for at Chindanduma. They met me on the first day and helped me offload my furniture and got rid of all the cockroaches in the house and turned my patch of dirt from a snake pit into a really very productive garden. They were absolutely wonderful. Nomore was the 12th child in his family and asked why he was called Nomore. His mother wished to make a statement and said, I've had 12 and I don't want any more. So no more, that's your name. I had been able to maintain my relationship with both Nomore and Lazarus since they came into Madziwa with the school truck on most weekends. Over time, it was clear that neither one was going to score well enough to go into the sixth form or able to go on to a college. I began to feel some growing concern for the life that they would be facing at the end of the academic year, as for the first time since independence, these two destitutes would be out of the protective womb of their school. Nomore was more clear-headed and knew that he was not going to make the cut. He was clear that he did not wish to rejoin the army, where he had previously risen to the rank of an NCO. Lazarus had different dreams. He was good with his hands and had done well with his practicals in metalwork. After the exams in November, Lazarus visited me frequently at Matumba. He was certain that he was going to become an apprentice with a German tool and die maker in Chennai. He needed 5 O-level passes in order to get into the program, and then he had to compete with thousands of other applicants. The odds were not in his favor, and I knew it. After writing all 13 of his exams, David came to say goodbye to his mentor. When he asked me if I knew of anyone who could help him on his farm, I immediately thought of Lazarus. I sent word for him to come and visit the same day. When they met, Lazarus was offered a chance to stay and look after the farm and spend the next year while David would return to school to complete his studies. It seemed like a perfect match. Of work, now I must go to Chennai. I was surprised and saddened by his rejection of the offer, since Lazarus had now completed his time at Chindanduma. Just stay there with David, I suggest, at least until the exam results come in. Then, if you get into the program you want, you can leave. At least you will have somewhere to stay. I was hoping Lazarus would have a home for the foreseeable future. He was a natural farmer, but he had no home area to go to, no parent or village headman to give him land. Without this, he was likely to end up on the streets of some shanty town, trying to scrape together a living for himself or become a poor farm worker. At the end of the school year, there had been a prize-giving day. My English students were asked to read some poems and even mounted a debate. I discovered mission-administered funds, MAF grants, and managed to obtain some money from the Canadian High Commission to acquire a few ovens for the school, and the proud first ever home economics students to work with such an oven baked fresh bread and cakes to celebrate what turned out to be Mr. Matema's retirement party. There were many tears quietly shed that day when he broke the news. His replacement, Mr. Chisamba, was also present. He was a tall, thick-set, loud man who towered over Mr. Matema, and the contrast could not have been more stark. The next day I discovered that I was to be moved out of what he decided was to be the headmaster's house. I was crammed into a tiny house with enough room for my bed and desk, I had no difficulty in selling the remainder of my furniture to other staff members. There was a bathroom, but it was entered from the outside, and the toilet was located beside a termite mound, which was a popular hangout for boomslangs, a slightly less venomous version of the cobra, but its cousin nonetheless. The following February, many things happened. Nomore returned to army life, though he broke down and cried as he told me he was to report to begin basic training. David was accepted to another school much closer to home and was going to sit 5 more O-levels, having passed all 10 ZJCs, with a narrowly failing the third. But I like to think that he passed well and later became a successful businessman. Lazarus, by contrast, vanished, having failed all but one of his courses. Our paths did cross again much later, but it took some efforts on my part to track him down. He was working on a farm in the Midlands area of Zimbabwe, herding cattle. He had fallen in love with a young girl and claimed that he had a white father who would help pay the bride price. Upon hearing this news, the father demanded 12 cattle for his uneducated daughter. As much as I would have liked to have helped him out, this was way beyond my means. Meanwhile, Rudo did not appear at school for her final year to sit the O-level exams that would have been her ticket to a salaried future. I felt discouraged and wondered if exam fees had been an issue. I wanted to find the family farm, but my young colleagues discouraged me from doing so. I guessed that there was some cultural taboo that was getting in the way. There were times when the aunties prepared their nieces for adulthood, whether or not the child in question wished to continue with her education. Perhaps a groom had been found for her, and she would have had no say in the matter. I didn't press the issue. After the Easter holidays, however, I encountered Rudo at the Madziwa market. In her arms was a tiny infant. She was coming from the hospital accompanied by an elder sister. "Hello, Mr. Garford. I'm sorry I could not complete my schooling, especially after you bought me that nice uniform. This is the present that Mr. Nube has given me on the same day. I have not seen him since the end of term." I was at a loss for words. I looked at her, but her face dipped and her eyes averted the searching glance. Gone was the moment to read her feelings. "Is it a boy or a girl, Rudo?" I asked lamely. "She is a girl. I call her Fadzai," she replied, smiling as she did so, but quickly looking away again. "So I am to stop calling you Rudo and now call you Amai Fadzai?" I asked, knowing that a child who has no father to protect her would face a very difficult life. She blushed as the realization seemed to hit her. No longer was she going to be the young girl called Rudo, and she was the mother of Fadzai. "I am going to stay with my grandmother. I don't think you will see me again. She lives away beyond Mount Darwin. But thank you for the uniform." Poverty creates a cruel imbalance of power, and it also hurts the more when those who are meant to protect and nurture are the very ones who teach young people distrust and cunning in order to survive. It always amazed me how patient, how enduring my poor rural charges were. At times my heart ached, and I wondered what I would do if I ever found myself in such a situation. As it happened, Africa was about to put me to that test. It was I was shopping at the market in Madziwa when I encountered a young woman I had taught previously at Chindanduma. I had not seen her in some time, and all I could recall was that she had not been a very serious student. Tendai failed a number of her exams and was afraid to return home. To make matters worse, a distant uncle who had a shop in Madziwa offered her shelter and then tried to rape her. She had no money to return home and was scared to stay around. She came up to me and asked me to help her. It was late in the day and I knew she would not manage to get home that night, so I told her to come and put up at our house. She slept with the lady teacher, and in the morning we talked about what to do with her. Her family lived in the Zambezi Valley and were peasant farmers. She had been away from home for the better part of 11 years, first as a refugee in Mozambique, and then as a boarder at both Chindanduma Primary and then the secondary school. She had gone home only briefly during some of the long breaks, but mostly she had remained behind to harvest the crops at school. At this point, she was unsure what her family would say now that she had no school to go to and no home. As fate would have it, I was also in a vulnerable position. I had met Linda, a writer in Harare, who helped me produce a guide on how to write essays for the O-level exams. She introduced me to a publisher, and I was waiting for permission from WUSC to go ahead with the actual printing. After a letter had appeared in the Harare Herald following the American attack on Libya, distancing the Canadian volunteers from this action, WUSC decided that everything we wrote, including useful textbooks, had to be approved prior to publication. Linda and I spent a good amount of time together while I was working on the book, and I had allowed my feelings to get the better of me. She did not, realizing that I was likely to return to Canada eventually, and abruptly broke it off. I was on the rebound. The Volkswagen saga had depleted my finances and enriched an unscrupulous Boer garage owner in Bindura. The consequences of this was that I had to live on memories rather than create new ones for myself, as the piggy bank was definitely empty. I did not know what was going on with Gladys, but after some months, her laundry shifts began to be less frequent. She started to wash my clothes at her home, so I found myself having to go into Madziwa to collect them sometimes, which was becoming inconvenient and somewhat annoying. Mrs. Makiwa, who offered to let Tendai share her bed, said that she could do so only for a while longer. Tendai suggested that she could do our laundry and clean the house until she had decided what she wanted to do. After about 3 weeks, I found that I enjoyed her cheery presence around and started to take another look at our situation. My contract with WUSC was expiring in August, and there were formalities that had to be taken care of. This required me to take days off to attend workshops, visits to the High Commission, and paperwork with the Zimbabwean Tax Department. Lunchtime usually occurred at Miko's Hotel in central Harare, where they served very decent food at reasonable prices. I found myself at a table beside a group of enthusiastic young people, mostly from North America, who were talking about their orientation and their respective homestay parents. They were international Rotary exchange students and were at school in different parts of Harare, Gweru, or Bulawayo. Pardon me for intruding, but did I hear someone mention Burnaby? After the obligatory, "Oh my God," was out of the way, I was introduced to Carly, a secondary school student from Burnaby North, the very school where I had undertaken my first teacher practicum. The group happily shared their adventures with me and told me about all the game parks they had visited and how nice and modern the cities were and the fabulous houses they were staying in, with servants, no less. "How many of you have taken a bus outside of the city?" I asked. "Oh, we don't need to," was the general response. Some timidly suggested that they would be scared to do so, though they might take a train somewhere. Has anyone been to the rural areas? There was a blanket no to this question. I explained that I had been teaching up in the rural areas around Madziwa for the past 3 years and extended an invitation to anyone who felt like spending a few days up there. I don't have a car, but the bus is always an adventure and I could accompany you up there. I'm returning on Thursday sometime, so if you would like to see the real Africa, here is the number of the Whisk office and you can leave me a message. To her credit, Kylie managed to convince her homestay parents, and I was to meet her at the Dominican convent school in Harare when I was ready to leave. The trip out of town took us past the commercial farms, the Missouri Citrus Estate, which was a huge and highly productive home of the nation's orange juice, and up into the tribal trust lands where she saw mud huts, cattle herds, goats, and village markets. It was exotic and exciting to her, and when we arrived at the school, the young, unqualified teachers were drawn to her like bees to a honey pot. We found her a room in a house with the Mauritian family, and she was to meet up with my English classes after recess the next day. She arrived wearing a colourful t-shirt, culottes, and Birkenstocks, and rather than stand in front of the 46 students in my class, she chose to sit cross-legged on the table which served as the teacher's desk. The class were very surprised by this. They, in contrast, were all dressed in starchy school uniforms and were used to sitting upright in their chairs. She introduced herself but quickly ran out of ideas about what to say. She turned to look to me for help. I think they would be very interested to hear about what you do on weekends, Carly. What would you be doing after school on a Friday in Vancouver? She could relate to that. Oh, nothing much. My friends and me, well, we might just hang out together. Some of us could have a team to play on, volleyball or basketball or hockey, and others might have jobs at McDonald's or somewhere. She went on about making phone calls into the night and possibly going to see the latest movie with her friends. What about Saturdays? I prodded, going after the minutiae, and all the while noticing the eyes of my students growing bigger at the utterance. What time do you usually get up on Saturday? 9:30, I guess. We watch cartoons until 11, and then we would all meet up at the mall and go shopping or just chill out. The class began to interact with her and ask her questions, but her students might be asking a teacher rather than peer-to-peer. They wanted to know when she did her homework, about attending church on Sundays, how many brothers and sisters she had, what food she ate, and all the things that defined their life experiences in contrast to hers. Carly was an intelligent and sensitive youngster, and her own horizons grew a little as well in that hour. I had asked the twins in the class to invite Carly to spend the night with them, and they would see she got back the following day, if that was what she wanted, was when she wanted to return, or she could spend Saturday night there too. After studies were over, she joined in a game of handball with the girls, and they gathered her things and said goodbye and headed off towards the village with her new friends. The family set about their chores, and she tried to fit in and help, though she was not used to plucking chickens or fetching water. Carly was honored with chicken and rice, a special treat for guests, as meat was rarely served. After supper on Friday night, she watched the other girls wash the dishes and sat around the fire, which served both as kitchen stove and family hearth, answered questions and shared stories with those who were gathered there. The younger children in particular gravitated towards her and practiced saying, "How are you?" and then ran away with fits of laughter. Some came and sat with her, but she was somewhat hesitant at having dusty little children touching her. She was not ready for the darkness, which comes suddenly in Africa, and she was certainly not ready to fall asleep on a mat outside the hut with the other girls at 8 o'clock that night. It had been an early night, as the family would be rising early. In the morning, during the rainy season, the whole family needs to work, as well as a well-functioning unit. The routine begins very early when there is a bright moon shining and the air is cool and crisp. At around 4 a.m., the girls are up lighting fires for people to wash in warm water, and some of it is boiled to make tea. If you are big enough to wield a hoe, you are soon down at one end of a row, and a line of drones uh, slap their tools into the soil and yank out the choking weeds, giving room for the maize stalks to breathe and extract moisture from the rapidly drying soil. Those who remain at the huts begin pounding the maize to make porridge, wash an assortment of dishes, sweep the compound so that no snakes can hide, and endlessly fetch water. There are also reminders of infants who are wrapped in a blanket and strapped onto their backs so they can carry on preparing a meal for those in the fields. Carly elected to head out to the fields, but was soon left behind to such an extent that she was encouraged to return to the huts to help prepare the food. She wandered back to the huts and waited for them to finish making the porridge, which she then ate, and went back to the hut and slept while the others took the food to the fields shortly after sunrise. It was very strange, Mr. Garford. When we got back there was no sign of her. We were worried about her. Had she become ill? We did not know. We later discovered that she had taken a bus in the afternoon, so I thought she must be okay. But I do not understand why she did not say goodbye, sir. Did we do something wrong? There was very real concern in Hope's voice on Monday as she related the facts to me. I had been heading to the market with Tendai to shop quite early on Saturday morning and was surprised to see Carly steaming past us and heading in the opposite direction. I was a little concerned, but I told her that we'd be back within the hour and we could have lunch together. When we returned, we too discovered an empty room and no sign of Carly. We had not passed her on the path, so she must have deliberately chosen to follow the road, which was a longer route into the village, in order to avoid meeting us on the way. In the subsequent days, I learned from the twins that what they knew, and after their initial excitement at having a Canadian girl stay with them, they wanted to know if they had done something to offend her. They also agreed that she was not a very good worker. That girl, said Faith, uh, 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 as Faith put it so succinctly, I think she is very lazy. The next time I was in Harare, I tried to contact her. After a brief telephone conversation, we agreed to have lunch at Meikle's, but she never showed up. 2 hours later, I called again, and the homestay parents informed me that she had decided she didn't want to meet me after all, but had no phone number to call me back. I was saddened because I would have liked to have had the opportunity to learn her side of the story.